Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Culpeper Chamber of Commerce Town Hall on hiring and interviewing, featuring Neil Mars from Germanna Community College. Today's town hall is brought to you by our chamber partner, Chrysler of Culpeper. Neil joined us 2 weeks ago to chat a little bit, and he is currently an associate professor of business at Germanna Community College, marketing faculty for the institution, and is also chairman of the business peer group for the Virginia Community College system. Neil has also taught courses in human resources, finance, and supervision at Germanna and has been at Germanna since 2010. In addition, Neil is the president of Solutions Recruiting, the HR consulting and executive search firm he founded in 2001. He works primarily with major industrial service corporations throughout the U.S., helping them optimize their hiring processes and fill high-level and specialized positions. His prior experience includes serving as vice president of sales for RUS, a $300 million industrial services company formerly based in Culpeper, along with extensive experience with Fortune 500 companies prior. He has also been a speaker for multiple national and local programs on the subject of hiring and recruiting. Neil holds a master's degree in business from the University of Rochester, New York, and is certified in the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator System. Neil currently serves on the board of directors for Hospice of the Piedmont and is a former board president with 15 years of service. Neil, thank you for joining us again today and look forward to your presentation. For those that are listening, if you have any questions, please type them in chat and we'll ask them later on after Neil's presentation. So please, Neil, the floor is yours. Thank you for joining us again.
Thanks for having me, Jeff. First of all, a couple of housekeeping things. The cat that was jumping on in front of me here, I just put her on the hall. And if the dog that's asleep under the desk, if the snoring gets too loud, let me know, and I'll escort her out as well. What I'm going to do is this: I'm going to take a few minutes, and I want to run through a few things as a follow-up from our last discussion. We talked about last time. And I'm just going to drive my screen here. The last session that we had, we talked about the hiring process and how important that is to any company, but particularly a local company, to make sure that you do it right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through a brief presentation here and talk about the first step in the process, and that's job analysis, making sure you've got the job set up the right way. But just 30 seconds on my background. First half of my career spent with big companies, and most notably RUS. It was noticeable about that. Not only was it a local Culpeper company, but it was, when I started there, we had 75 people. I was a vice president of sales, 75 people in the sales force, and we had to go to 150. So we doubled the size of our sales organization in about a 5-year period. So you not only have to get good at hiring as a transaction, you have to be good at the hiring process, which we learned to do. And secondly, for the last almost 20 years, in addition to teaching at Germanna for 10, had my own HR recruiting and consulting business. And notably there, I've done over 10,000 interviews over the past 10 years. So 20 years. So I've spent certainly a lot of time in my career on this process. Now, what we talked about last time was I broke the hiring process into 5 stages and really talked about the importance. First of all, the outputs are going to come out of each one of them, but how each one of them has their own unique place. So we talked about marketing and selection. Selection would be the interview process, and marketing is how you're finding people and bringing them in. Today, though, we're going to focus on job design, which is where it starts. And I'm going to give you some thoughts on what all that entails and what some of the important factors to keep in mind as you're getting ready to hire back for your businesses. Now, quick definitions, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time reading through these. That's a job analysis, really talks about job content and the requirements needed that employees need to bring forward. And job design is about kind of the methods and processes and this kind of the social environment they have to be in. So said differently, it's before you hire somebody, it's doing an analysis on what exactly you need. And then secondly, once you've got what you need, it's designing the job so it fits that. So you're going to have the desired outcomes, and you're going to be using the person's strengths to their best ability. So what does that entail? Well, things that you might be a little bit more familiar with. The job analysis portion, out of that comes a job description. We've all seen those. You're applying for a job yourself. You see usually a couple of pages long or a page or two long of things that they're going to expect person to do in great detail. They're going to list, and with that is typically comes good job specifications. Here are the things we're looking for. Here are the requirements for the job. So it's the analysis parts. The output's going to be those things. And in the design, when we talk design, I'm going to talk more about it shortly. But really is about kind of the who, what, where, when, and how of the job. So what are they going to be doing? Where they're going to be doing it? Times, why, and what role it plays in it. The specifics about what the employee is going to be doing. Some of that, to me, that's fairly complicated. So I'm going to break it simpler. You want to hire the right person for the job. The first thing, think of it this way. The first thing that you need to do is understand, first of all, what does success look like in the analysis portion? And I'm going to tell you how to do that in a minute. But what does it look like? What does it mean? And if you're having success with that position, what's the person doing? Secondly, if that's the case, what tools do they need to bring with them, and do you need to provide them to let them do that? Now, so once you get that part of it done from the design standpoint, okay, are you creating a job that prepares them for success? It gives them the opportunity to get there and gives them a direct path to do that and doesn't present them obstacles. And last but not least, fit. Are you bringing in people that have the right quantitative and qualitative factors necessary, and are you creating an environment that's going to be successful? I'm going to talk more about those, but if you break them into a word, the word for analysis, you're going to need to know what you need, and then you need to make sure at the other side it's doable, and you're making it doable. Looking at it a little differently, it's also these first top things are what the company does, and the bottom are what the employee brings. Now, let's jump into it and talk from an analysis standpoint. Really what I do, what I suggest to clients or anybody that asks me about this, when you're thinking about hiring a job, spend whether it's a minute or an hour or however long you've got, and I want you to picture what success looks like. And kind of the scenario, you want to really start with what are the outcomes? Before I was in the position, what's at the end? What are the outcomes? And I ask people to go through an exercise, and I say, all right, it's a year from now, and you and I are talking, and we're toasting our success for bringing a new employee. There could be 1,000 things the person did, but invariably, there's going to be 2 or 3 things the person did or changed that are going to have us toasting our success here. What are they? And it's amazing. When you ask people about a job description, they give you this long list of things that they need. When you ask them that, they give you 2 or 3 things. All right, they got to do this or that. So what it might look like, so examples might be, if you're going to hire somebody in accounting or finance, the outcomes are this person perhaps saved us money, or they made certain process work more efficiently or faster, so we're able to get more done. So that's the outcome of hiring the person. They've done those things. If you hired a retail salesperson, it's our sales went up and they made lots of customer connections. Or thirdly, if you're hiring a manager, they did something like they reduced the turnover in their office and they increased the profit margins. So there's typically a couple of outcomes, 2 or 3 outcomes that you can point to for a position that will make it successful. And that's the very first thing somebody should do. Really the big and probably the most important they should do an analysis. So how you do that? You do a job description, and I think part of it is you want to document the behavior of people doing that job now, and then you want to go back and you cross-reference it based on your success factors. So if this is what I've got on my current job description for that position, do they tie to those things? Or do I have lots of things on there that don't? And if they don't, you got to ask yourself, why is it there? Or should it be there? Secondly, I use the term icons. I always say pick some number, and it depends on the situation, of people that are doing that job for you or somebody else. You say, that's what I want. Or they're the icon for this, or they're the prototype for what I'm looking for. And you want to examine, and if you can, I'll get to this at the end, interview these folks and talk to them, what is it you're doing, and why is that so successful? What is it you do? Where do you focus your time that makes you an icon like this? And I'll almost guarantee if you talk to 4 people, you're not going to get exactly the same thing from all 4, but you're going to get commonality that's going to help you understand that. You'll also understand where the variability comes in personalities. So talk to 3 or 4 people. I'd also strongly urge you to do some benchmarking, and that's why someplace like the Chamber is such a fabulous resource. to talk to you. If you're hiring any one of these types of positions and there's fellow chamber members, I strongly urge you to talk to them about it. I know, for example, on the hospice board, and this goes back a number of years, but we did that with at the time, Culpeper Regional Hospital 10 years ago, and asked them when we were doing some similar exercise, and it was extraordinarily valuable. So all these things in terms of setting up the analysis will help you understand what your success outcomes are and how do you put yourself in a place where you do them correctly. Now, the second phase is employee skills. So now that you've got these outcomes, I want to reduce turnover, or I want to increase margin or increase sales. All right, so what do I need? So that really is, those are the must-haves that an employee is going to bring with him to meet those outcomes. And that's important to note, and I'll talk about this in a second, but there's a difference between, like I said, I always get people to try to focus their time on, or focus, I'm trying to move that there, okay, on understanding the difference between a want and a need. And there's certain things that you may want and that may be very helpful to you for a given position, but you got to differ with what you need. So understand so examples might be an accountant. You might want 10 things from you. You might want a college degree. You might want a certain level of profession, and those are all good. But the things that you absolutely need could be something like, there could be a certification that they need to have to do the job, that either they need to have or they can get quickly. Maybe they've done part of it, or maybe they've shown a technical ability that would help let them learn quickly. So what they need to bring with them is something like, for those things, attention to, in addition to certification, attention to detail and curiosity. If they're going to be able to find and solve financial problems for you or puzzles for you, are they going to be curious enough to go look for them? For retail sales, it could be somebody that's reliable. If part of is to increase sales, one of the things that I would want to investigate is, are they timely? Do they have a record of what's their attendance record? Because a person could be the best salesperson in the world, but if their pattern of behavior doesn't indicate that they're going to be on time and be there every day, they're not going to help you. So are they reliable? And are they engaging? And I'm going to separate the difference in engaging and outgoing. And this is interesting, and I've learned this over the years. A lot of great customer service people are introverts. Doesn't mean they have to be glib. What it means is that, and we can go into more detail at the end, but there's a difference between somebody that's going to just able to talk to everybody versus somebody that once somebody's in front of them, they're able to engage with them. So there's a difference between engaging and outgoing. And as a manager, are they a team builder? Are they good at building, consensus? Are they good at doing more than one thing at a time? So those are the kinds of things. So if those are the things you wanted from a manager, the desired outcomes, these are the things that they have to bring with them. Other things are nice to have. So how would you get this? As I said, you want to talk about it's wants versus needs. Maybe it's making an A and B list. I'll get to that in a second. You might also have two versions of your job description. That long version that I see, a lot of times I push it back at clients when they send it to me and they say, I get it, but this is 20 things or 10 things. Nobody's going to have all 10 of these things. Which are the ones or rank them for me. So maybe you if you can't get rid of any of them, you force rank them and you get to understand which are the most important. Maybe you have a long version and a short version. And this is good too. It's compare the attributes of these icons. If you've got let's say you've got a retail environment where you've had over the years a number of employees in there. You want to take maybe 3 or 4 top people and then 3 or 4 people that weren't successful and compare them. And I know at RUS we spent a lot of time analyzing the success of new business sales representatives. And we did that. And we had buckets of the people that were highly successful and those that weren't, and what was in between. And it was pretty stark a lot of times what you got when you broke it out that way. So compare attributes for these folks. And also something like a Myers-Briggs, and there's lots of other profiles and tests like that. So I have no vested interest in them, but that is a great way to not only, and we'll get to that at the end too, but not only, and I'm not a believer in using tests like that as a pass-fail to hire somebody. I don't think they're good for that, but they are good for, it's like having a highly respected, independent colleague interview the person and give you their opinion. Somebody who's a good judge of people. I wouldn't base my entire decision on it, but I'd sure listen to it. And then I would do something you could help you, a customer survey. Maybe if you're hiring somebody, talk to people that, that those folks have dealt with and say, tell me about the good and bad folks you've had. Pardon me. So those are things that you can most certainly do to help you with it. I'm gonna pause here just for a moment and see if you guys have any questions or anything before I keep going with that I can stop and answer for you.
If anyone has any questions, please type them in the chat, as we're watching the town hall on hiring and interviewing presented by Neil Mars and sponsored by our partners Chrysler of Culpeper here at the Culpeper Chamber of Commerce, and also brought to you by our Small Business Development Council, which Neil has joined us to help spread some awareness on hiring and interviewing. Any questions at all, please type it in the chat and Neil will be able to answer that for you.
And Jeff, if you see some of those, don't be afraid to wave at me. I'd be happy to stop and talk about that as we go. So, all right. Well, I will keep pressing forward then based on that. So we really covered kind of the job analysis portion. Now I'm going to talk about job design, and really it's setting yourself up for success. And really what that is about is that if you look at what you've come up with in that job analysis, that job description, if they do those things, are they going to yield the positive results you're looking for? They're going to get you the success, not just the skills, but the way they do it. So examples would be, if you've set this up, does the person, try to get you success? Does the person know how to do a Sarbanes-Oxley compliance? Do they know how to work with a general ledger? Can they, is there a system to have them set up flags when those take place? Are they good at, for example, a retail salesperson? Can they make a schedule? Are they good at doing that in the schedule you've got? Does it work? And are they good at connecting with people when they come into your establishment? And is the manager going to set up a system where the staff motivated and avoid the return? So some things you can do here. First of all, I can't stress this enough. When the person walks in, you say, all right, you tell somebody as part of the onboarding process, this is what we're evaluating you based on. And it could be, and there's probably going to be an A and a B list. All right. So if you said it's customer service, we're going to evaluate you on A, are you here all on time every day? And do you connect with customers? And then there's a list of other things that we're going to look at too. But tell them. And I'm going to pause here, and I'm going to get at the very end. I'm going to talk about a recent study that Gallup did, and it's reinforcing the same, their basic message on the things that drive engagement. But it sounds simple. I have somebody that's close to me that just went to work at an establishment, a regional establishment here, and she's not really sure what she's being evaluated against. She's not. There's a laundry list of things, and she's not sure what the primary things are. So don't take for granted that your employees know it. Said differently, the best way to drive discontent or lower morale is to let people be confused about what they have to do. Morale breaks down when people feel like they don't have a chance to be successful. So this first step is just tell them, okay, if you do these things, you're going to be successful. The second thing is, and this is an important one too, you've got to look at distractions. A couple of examples, and it's easy to do. You've got a business, and you're a small business, and in a small business, we all have to be good. And I've done this too at multitasking. I'm not just the president. I'm the sanitation engineer. I'm I wear lots of different, and small, but you wear lots of different hats. But what you can't do is in a job is to let somebody spend too much time on something that's going to put a monkey wrench in the machine. Two examples. One is there was a study that I read a couple years ago about it on this topic about a Dunkin' Donuts franchise that had hired a bunch of people, and they hired some good people that were good at engaging with customers. But they also, at the end of the day, and they thought of it as a throwaway. They thought of it as a simple little activity they had them doing, but they had them do some mailers to people in the community. And the mailing system didn't work well. The paper jammed. The system didn't integrate. It never worked smoothly any time. And that's what was driving turnover, is that they found that making them, sidetracking people into doing this kind of activity, it not only was it not fitting the skills that they were hired for, but it didn't work well. Second example was back in the day when I was at RUS. Our salespeople were evaluated on and compensated on new business. Now we had 90 locations across the eastern half of the U.S. A lot of times the local manager would say, look, I understand they're new business people, but I had a big customer service issue and I didn't have any people, so I had to deploy them into customer service. Okay, I hear you. And that I understand the pragmatic situations, particularly as small business people that we're all up to. But understand, if that's what you're holding them against, they're going to fail. They're not going to hit the numbers. If you've got them spending a day a week doing that, that's 20% of their time that's not going into this. They're not going to be successful at generating new business. So that is a huge issue, is to don't let them get pulled into other things that are not part of their mission. Are you giving the people, when you bring them on board, are you training them and telling them what they need to know? And, another tactic, another thing I found effective is to survey your employees and ask them a lot of these questions. It's an easy thing that most companies, frankly, don't do. Will spend time thinking about what their employees like. Ask them. Right. And then last but not least, fit is what you want to find is, this is the how portion of that design. Is both qualitative and quantitative. And when I say fit, I'm talking about was you're bringing somebody in. And one of the things that can happen is, first of all, that I've got a level 4 manager that I'm looking to hire, and my job specifications call for a level 7. Okay. You're not going to find somebody. And will you find somebody that you can afford for that level 4 job? Possibly, but the value proposition is probably not going to work for them. So you want to make sure that you're finding the right, level of person. Conversely, if you need somebody that can do all these, that can, function at level 4, and the person that you hire has only ever done level 2, you need to be real sure that they can take those other 2 level steps, or that you're going to provide the support to them when they do that. So part of it is level, and part of it is also, when I'm going to call the right prototype. And I'll explain what I mean by that in more detail in a couple minutes. I'm going to give you an example. But if you're saying, listen, I want people, you want to have the ideal candidate that walks in your door, be somebody that genuinely does fit the profile you want, and have it be not a needle in a haystack. So if you're looking for somebody and there's only 1 in a million people that are going to fit that prototype, you're going to be in trouble, or you're going to end up settling. So make sure that when you identify the right prototype, that they've got the skills that you're going to look for, that it's in as big a pile as possible. And I'll talk about that probably in the next section on a little bit more on the types of engaged passive candidates. Now, some examples. Now here's one for you. One of the things you look for: if you're a small company, the people you hire, are they used to working in small companies? Which means, are they used to having lots of resources available to them or not? 1,000 years ago, I was at Kraft. I spent the first year I was a financial analyst. I spent the first year at headquarters doing this with these very sophisticated systems that we had available to us to create P&Ls for the businesses. I get transferred to a company we had purchased a year before that, and I said, so where is the MPL system for us? And they said, oh, it's over there in Rohini's drawer. So literally, it was a night and day difference in terms of the level of sophistication. Now, it didn't faze me. I mean, I figured it out. It wasn't that hard, but that's not always true. So you want to make sure if you've got a small business, that people are going to be used to functioning in an environment where some of those resources aren't available. The retail sales, types of connections they're used to. They could have been a great salesperson, but make sure that it's either that it's been in a similar type of connection they've had to make with consumers, or that you feel confident they can get there. And, with managers, a lot of it's also going to be a level of autonomy. And if you look at different types of businesses, everybody has different levels. If a manager that's used to dealing with very much running their own show, if you're going to be a little bit more autocratic or a little bit more directive in how you approach them, that may be a work too. So it's making sure that when you bring somebody in, that they have to bring the right qualitative skills. Now, how do you do that? I think these are simple basics, and we'll get into them in management. It's short but regular feedback sessions. I think probably one of the best things I did as a manager was we used to do both 360-degree profiles, which I'll get into another time, but we'd also do a group like Myers-Briggs connection. Myers-Briggs is valuable. A lot of people try to use testing like that to be kind of as a pass-fail to get people in. As I said, I don't agree to that. I don't agree with that. I think it's a great tool. It's probably the best tool when you're working with people, when you're dealing with people that you work with, to have some type of a feedback session so everybody understands how they think. And Myers-Briggs, for example, is not about accomplishment. It's about how we think. And I can remember a quick story back in the day. I had a sales manager that worked for me out in Oklahoma. Because of my personality, I love this guy to death. I thought he was extraordinarily valuable. I personally liked him. I was happy whenever he called me. But he used to call in the afternoons when I was incredibly busy. I'm working at headquarters. And based on my personality, the way I think, he was driving me crazy because he wanted to sit and chat. And I kept saying, I don't have time for this. I want to help you. Download the information and let me go fix it for you. I was not understanding the way he thinks. He interpreted my actions as dismissive, and I interpreted his actions as insensitive. When we came together and did an exercise like this, we learned more about each other. Oh, okay. We understood the differences in how we process and helped us understand each other and work better together. I think assigning a mentor is critically important. Somebody that the person can go to and say, hey, how does this work? When I first got out of grad school at Kraft, I remember I worked with a guy, might have heard, Anthony Bizzuto. I was thinking of this, hey, Anthony person. I go, hey, Anthony, and here I'm a 22-year-old kid. Hey, Anthony, how does this work? Or, hey, who do I ask about this? Having something like that is, it's, hey, Anthony, is it okay if I do this, do you think? And there's times when he'd say, yeah, don't worry about it. It's not, oh, no, don't want to do that. So somebody that can kind of show you the ropes, I think helps in the assimilation process as well. Now, I'm going to give you a quick example here. Actually, I'll pause one more time as I'm thinking of it and say any questions. My next step is I'm going to give you an example of something I actually did with a client about 2 years ago that's worked extremely well, that uses this. Are there any questions, Jeff? Do we have any questions from anybody that people have?
We haven't seen any yet. Reminder, if anybody has any questions, please type it in the chat.
Right.
We'll ask those of Neil. So questions right now, Neil.
All right. Let me keep going then. I'm just about done here. Example, a client of mine, they're a specialty courier. What they do is they do time-sensitive delivery of pharmaceuticals to nursing homes and other healthcare facilities. So a pretty specialized company, a need that they have. They have a group of, they're basically the eastern 2/3 of the U.S. And so they have a series of branch locations built around the country, built around their major customers. And at the end of the day, what makes or breaks them is the GMs they have, the managers they have in the market. And the problem they were having is a lot of turnover. This company isn't the highest paying company in the world, and they were having a really tough time being able to grow. And the best way to describe turnover, I tell my students at Germana when we talk about HR, is it's like rowing a boat with a hole in it. You can keep rowing as fast as you can, but if you've got turnover, you're never going to get to the other side of the lake. So it's a problem. So they were always spending time hiring and no time training. So it really was a difficult situation. So what we did was they called me about filling a slot, but we said, listen, we want to create a repeatable process that allows us to identify the right profile and hire people so we're not spending all our time doing this. So what we did was we did a job analysis. We said, okay. And what I did was I interviewed a number of people from the company. I interviewed their senior executives. I interviewed numerous current managers, and they had a very diverse group of managers. I analyzed, what they were doing right now, the practices they were using to manage, the practices they were using to hire people, their backgrounds and where they were similar, and talked about their personalities. So I tried to set some, and we also did some benchmarking, looked at some other similar companies. So a lot of analysis on who was successful and who wasn't and what they were doing. And what we found was that when if you talk to 5 managers, you got 5 different answers on what it is that made them successful, at least at the beginning you did, and how they went about it. That's a challenge because then there's no way of developing a consistent process. And they varied widely based on when they said, what should a manager do? I said, describe a good manager to me. It was a highly varied list of in terms of whether you needed a degree, the types of experience you needed. They weren't focusing on outcomes. They were focusing on, here's the things that tend to be successful. So it was very inconsistent, and the turnover was high. But there was, when you analyze it based on outcomes, commonality. And the commonality was the must-haves were three things. They said, we need people that are team builders, meaning both internally and externally, that are good at kind of rallying the troops. You need people that are multitaskers. The tasks aren't necessarily that complicated, but there's 4 or 5 things going on at one time. They got to be able to balance those. And thirdly, they have to be good at the hiring process. So we said, okay, we looked at those things, and it took there was some angst with the folks there, with the CEO in particular. I've done this a long time. It can't be that simple. I said, okay. But eventually he said, all right, I see what you're saying. Here are the 3 things. All the other things they talked about, the industry experience, educate, was all less important. We said, that's down the list. This is what we need to have. And what we did was we changed the profile. We said, okay, we looked at it and said, okay, you know what else fits this? Restaurant managers. Restaurant managers are going to have all of these things going for them. They're going to be able to, successful ones are going to be able to do all these things. They're also going, this is also going to be a great, I'm going to say, value proposition for both. They're going to give us all the skills we need, and we're going to probably be all the skills we need, and we're going to give them a whole different lifestyle, because they're not going to be working until 3 o'clock in the morning doing this, or getting up at having to go in on Saturday at 10 p.m. So they by focusing on the outcomes, we shifted the paradigm. We found a different profile. There was a very robust set of people in any market. There's lots of folks that have restaurant management experience, and it's been enormously successful. So once again, that's a success story based on the analysis we did, said, this is what we need. This is where we can find the people. This is how they fit into the system. Basically now half their national team fits this. They have grown dramatically, added a lot of business, and they're very confident. And the funny thing was, and I gave him a comparison. He called me, said, all right, I think I got you this time. We're going to search in Hawkinsville, Georgia, which is about 1/5 the size of Culpeper. It's tiny. And sure enough, we used this and found them the perfect person. So with that said, this process works. So really it's about starting with the outcomes, identifying what the must-haves are, and then making sure that you have set aside, understand the mutual value proposition available to both sides. All right. A couple of some suggestions here, things that you can do that I think will help you. I think that 1 year from today exercise is one of the best things that I do with clients. And as I said, what it forces you to do is to think about, to put the laundry list, all right, if they could just do these things, we're going to be in good shape. So it makes you focus on the outcomes, and it really, I think, is very valuable in getting you to understand what's important. Engineer the job. Take a look at the job and what can you do with the job doing it to make it more focused against those outcomes. I'm going to take that task away from it. I'm going to give that to somebody else, or I'm going to make sure, what can you do to make it more efficient for them and easy for them? It could be, if you're in retail, it could be moving where the inventory sits if they've got to bring it out on the floor. I don't know what it is, but what can you do about the specifics of the job to keep them doing those must-haves more often? I think, and there's enough tools out there. You probably need some help putting an analysis together, but I would strongly urge somebody to do either that or in other profiles, and do it for the team, and then compare notes, and then show each other here. And let's talk about how this means we need to communicate with one another. I've done that, and I've had that be make or break in a couple of situations that folks that have worked for me. I do lots of interviews when I do this. Talk to your current employees, talk to your customers, and find where that dissonance is. Find what it is they love about it, and let them tell you, here's how we can make the job more focused. I also a big believer in taking a look at, if you've had some number of people over the last couple of years, taking a look at them and objectively looking at their backgrounds or the people, and putting them in the piles of these folks have done great and these didn't, and finding where you see the similarities or the differences. Like I said, gotten a lot of data out of that over the years as well. So those are some suggestions. Now, last thought I'm going to leave you with, is it was a recent article and had to do obviously with the situation we're going through now. It talked about from Gallup. And Gallup, these are the workplace engagement people. These are the folks, this is, Gallup polls that have been around for years, for decades. And that they had very recently had an article on, is your culture resistant to survive the coronavirus? And the answer is going to be, can most certainly be yes. And it really gets back to some of the fundamental things that their engagement survey talks about. And it talks about, one is setting clear expectations. And I talked about that before. As you're getting ready to gear back up and get back at it, are you being clear with, here's what I want? And it's, I need it this time by this day. And and letting people help to meet that. So making sure you set priorities and understand how you're going to evaluate their success. 2, are you giving them the materials and the equipment they need? Best quote I ever got was from a candidate one time. This was ages ago. But I said to him, what makes you want to leave your company? He said, they asked me to dig to Australia and they gave me a plastic spoon. I get it. He said, they want me to do a lot of stuff, but they haven't really given me the tools and resources to get there. So when you look at those outcomes, you're giving people the right things. Are you putting people in a position to do what they do best? Had lots of that when I was at RUS. Remember when I first started, there were people doing things that were talented, but they weren't being put in a position to do the thing they did best often. That is deeply frustrating. If you ask me to do accounting, can I do accounting and financial analysis? Yes. If you ask me to do it all day, I'd go crazy. All right, that's not what I do best. Connect them to the mission. I know that's big with Germanic, because we've all had through this pandemic tremendous challenges. But the thing that's helpful is to connect for Germana, to connect back to the concept that we are developing young minds, and that this period and their ability to not just have resilient, but their ability to not just be resilient, but thrive during an environment like this is a motivator. So you know what? You work through it, you figure it out, and you find a better way to do it. And I'll tell you right now, I'm a better teacher today than I was 6 months ago, because it forced me to be better. And lastly, you want to make sure your people are committed to doing quality work. With that said, that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about. Is there anything else any questions, Jeff, anything else I can answer for or elaborate on or specific scenarios that somebody would want to talk about? Does anybody have a particular issue that they're dealing with that they'd like to discuss?
If anybody has any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat. That was a great opportunity to ask Neil. If you have any questions at all, please share those in the chat, or if anybody has any questions that they'd like to chime in, just unmute yourself and feel free to ask Neil. So now's a great opportunity. Are there any questions for Neil out there?
And if anybody knows Andrew Ferlazzo, I promise not to talk about him on this call. I've known him for a long time, and I promise not to share any tidbits on him, at least as a group. Individually, I might do that.
I'd like to remind everybody that if you'd like to go back and view this again, this town hall sponsored by Chrysler Culpeper and brought to you by the Culpeper Chamber of Commerce Small Business Development Council will be available on our YouTube channel as well. So you can go back and review what Neil has shared. That'll be living on our YouTube channel and will also be posted on our Facebook channel. And if I don't see any other questions, Neil, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Coming on board, and we're going to have a part 3 with Neil coming up shortly. So I thank everybody for joining us here at the Culpeper Chamber of Commerce Town Hall on Hiring and Interviewing with Neil Mars, and brought to you by our sponsors, Chrysler of Culpeper. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Neil. That was great.
Okay, thank you.